それじゃあ
VTuber culture in a nutshell. We open this one with some tasty looking cotton candy being rolled around by a dung beetle. Oh wait, that's the pink stuff from Digimon, isn't it?
Koromon, you couldn't wait?
Side note, did anyone else amazed that they managed to air that on the English dub version of the show? God, I miss the 90s and them literally not giving a crap. But yeah, through some justified reused animation, we saw that the dung beetle named Funta, which yes means feces because the show can't be subtle, get hit by the original black light. And as a result, he not only developed a pretty badass looking marking, but his VA also took it down a few octaves. Yeah, I think your destiny is more to be a part of one of the scariest goddamn scenes in all of Precure. Anyway, after cleverly establishing that these events were taking place in the early parts of the show with the girls' little exchange here, we saw that Funta became the alpha bug because of his additional strength and assertiveness. And as a result, he wasn't hostile and I guess wasn't picked up by Peach, so life was good for him until autumn rolled around and, well... Boy,
that escalated quickly.
I mean, just wow, way to slap that fun little bug story with a sudden dose of reality there, y'all. And following this, our little bug friend went through a bit of an existential crisis after realizing his semi-godhood made it impossible for him to live amongst his own kind. I mean, geez, what's next? I didn't bring up some really heavy subject matter in a show about little witches, and I should have figured. And on the subject of writing, I think we should point out the likely influence behind Funta's character.
If you meet people, your days are numbered. Prepare for the coming of Earth.
Okay, so they're not exactly the same bug, but I still do interpret this character as the show's version of Roach Coach. Both characters are meant to be negative allegories of middle-aged men who actively reject society, and yeah, don't exactly have the best hygiene either. That said, their ultimate goals were very different, likely due to significant cultural differences. RC had far more nihilistic views, believing that the world would have been better off with no humans and just run by the roaches, being one himself. Meanwhile, Funta was a societal reject because he tried to resist his very nature. Yeah, as I've brought up more than once on this channel, while I don't think Japan tries to completely squash out individuality, they do have a bit of a tendency to put a much heavier emphasis on the group dynamics. Thus, if you actively go against the norms, you're seen as somewhat of an outcast of society. Now, thankfully, from what I've seen, this isn't an absolute rule, and hell, this episode will soon show an example of what overcompensating for societal norms can turn into. Still, it is interesting to compare and contrast what the East and West view as negative portrayals of the average Joe. As for why they didn't go with a cockroach, well, I think that's mostly just because Japan really hates those bugs. Granted, while some of these examples are over-exaggerated for comedy, there does seem to be an even bigger stigma for the little brown bug, to the point that Gokiburi is treated as a profanity, and they have to shorten it down to just G. I mean, either that, or they see them as the next incarnation of Voldemort. I think the only exception to this rule is when it's a modified blob voiced by Mamiko Noto. Yes, this was a thing. Japan is a little weird sometimes. Anyway, super bug or not, everyone needs to get out of the cold, so Funta made his way to the nearest building. I just said, he's not that middle-aged dude. The girls tried to squash him, but Ken stopped and then lectured them about not harming smaller creatures. He also provided some legit good facts about the importance of the little insect known as the dung beetle. Again, this does really feel like a recreation of the Roach Coach episode, considering that his father in that universe gave a similar speech about roaches, albeit with a little more of his own fanfiction thrown in. Noticing Funta's unusual markings, they decided to drop him off at the local insect garden, believing that he was a new species. As a result, he managed to score some food as well as a blatant love interest. Seriously, between her and the pink butterfree, you'll have less subtlety than Disney love interests. Anyway, he took her outside during the winter, which yeah, wasn't the wisest thing to do, and was even cleverly foreshadowed here with Koroko clearly wrapping her arms up. However, Funta was too busy thinking about his crap, like all dudes do, and wanted to make a dung ball to propose to her on. And of course, since he was a super bug, he couldn't just sell for a small one, and I think this music is only appropriate. The girls deployed to fight the Kalamari in one of the more impressive engagements for this series. I mean, sure, it wasn't a long fight and was mostly taken up by stock animation, but again, I point you to the literal giant ball of crap and Kaoru tried to hold it back as though it were a steamroller. I love it when these shows do my job for me. Still, ultimately, the fight was cut short when Funta either somehow read Koroko's mind or finally remembered what that toad said about bugs in the winter and quickly made his way back to his lady. And while Koroko genuinely enjoyed finally being outside of the garden with someone who loved her, she also didn't realize that same guy's selfish visions of grandeur had put her in danger. I'm sorry, did this show just make me feel for a couple of dung beetles? Yeah, so while I'm not totally behind this message that seems to be leaning more towards those collectivist values that encourage viewers to just conform to the norms established by others, I also do want to think they're trying to encourage viewers to just be themselves and not try to take either extreme as the hopeless rebel without the cause or the overly traditionalist who tries to hog all of the crap to prove their worth. And again, this is all told through a rather touching tale between a couple of dung beetles. How do you do that? But yeah, this story ended with the black light leaving Funta and the dung beetle couple thankfully surviving at the bug garden. From one love story to the next, we learned about Momoko's, 568 failed attempt at getting Senpai to notice her. She tried to bury her sorrows in sugar with one of Sakurako's signature roll cakes that she was making a little bit too much of, having been distracted by the fact that Soichiro hadn't come in for a while. And even when she made a proper version of the dish... Gentle, you're not supposed to work on Wednesdays. Anyway, I'm guessing because he was watching all the rom-coms of the season, all really good by the way, Ken tried to encourage Sakurako to be more strategic with her pursuits of Soichiro. Of course, the timid lady herself wasn't going to be that forceful, but maybe her hourglass alter ego would be. Sedusa, of course, tried to use her ample assets, but of all characters, Soichiro proved to be a total Chad. You see, Takumi, this is how you do it. But yeah, really good comedy in this one, with the best part easily being Sedusa's army of simps, who ended up playing a part in the eventual fight with the girls. Again, even if the animation wasn't the greatest, just the absolute absurdity of the fact that the girls were fighting a bunch of projectile simps was hilarious, especially when the mayor and Momoko Senpai were a part of them. Oh, so this is what the spear guy was like in his middle school days. Every bit as pathetic as we all imagined. The fight reached a quick end when Momoko finally got into things, having been distracted by the feeling that something was off about that roll cake. And as it turned out, it wasn't the bundles, but rather the uncle. Yeah, don't worry, this will be relevant in just a sec. But yeah, Sakurako had been using a substitute bean paste after her usual supplier had run out, and I'm pretty sure those aren't red beans. They look more like Emperor Piero's core. Fortunately, as it turned out, the reason Soichiro hadn't been to the shop was because he was trying to backtrack the beans for her. Thus, this episode ended on an especially sweet note, with the two making up, and Momoko not giving a crap about Motoyasu, as everyone should. Is it weird for me to say that in spite of this episode having a Sedusa story, I kind of like the tale between the dung beetles more? I mean, don't get me wrong, anything featuring Sedusa and her antics are very entertaining, and Soichiro remaining loyal to Sakurako is very touching. And yet, because of some excellent performances and Kageyama's writing, I actually kind of like the love story between the dung beetles more, probably because Funta was such a great one-off villain. Regardless, both stories were great, and did show how love can sometimes be needlessly complicated. While I certainly might be overthinking things, the story of the dung beetle named Funta does feel like an allegory for maturing into adulthood. We might think we're hot dung in our early years, but eventually we do have to accept at least some of the norms in order to become a part of society. And again, while I'm not totally behind this message, especially knowing how Japan treats its working class, I do like that ultimately Funta was able to put aside his selfish desires and realize that while some freedom is important, we should also try to work within certain boundaries when considering the needs and abilities of others. This was a surprisingly deep character piece with some major props needing to go to the Oji Jotaro Jurota Kosugi for again making me feel for a dung beetle. Thus, the Sedusa half of this episode was kind of overshadowed, and again, don't get me wrong, it was still a good outing for one of the best creations of this version of the PPG. Her antics with her simp army were hilarious, and Choichiro was pretty awesome for just a requisite love interest character. And while this was arguably her weakest episode so far, that was more so due to the fact that the previous two were full-on episodes, and this was just a quick but fun little rom-com sketch. And in either case, the fights here were a ton of fun, be it against a stand-empowered bug or projectile simps. Just the fact I can say those instances makes this one of my personal favorite episodes of this entire series. Love can sometimes feel like war, and this show certainly took it to its logical extremes. I hope everyone's doing well and is getting ready for those hot summer days on the horizon. For now, we're just going to work on some of the usual stuff as well as some new material that will hopefully expand the reach of this channel. We'll just see how many of y'all can appreciate a good card game with or without motorcycles. And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and uh-oh, looks like those bugs touched the spears again. Quick, everyone, lock up your cars and rollers!